If someone stole 10 years of your life, you'd notice. But what if they didn't take it all at once? What if it disappeared slowly, through messages, phone calls, and voices you trusted? This is not a story about a bad breakup. It's not even a story about being lied to. It's the story of how a decade quietly slipped away, while everyone involved believed they were doing the right thing. This is the story of Kirat Assi, and the relationship that was never real. Welcome to this deep dive into one of the most elaborate catfishing cases ever documented. Today we're exploring a case that makes every other online scam seem simple by comparison. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the incredible investigative work done by Tortoise Media and their reporter Alexei Mostras for his podcast Sweet Bobby. His first-hand interviews with the people involved in this case have been invaluable in piecing together this unbelievable story. Our story begins in the spring of 2011. Kirat Assi, a 31-year-old radio host, went out for an evening of fun with friends at a club called Lola's in Brighton, just outside London. She describes it as a cheesy club with a Hawaiian theme, but the company made it enjoyable. It was around 1:00 a.m. when a man wearing a turban entered the club with a friend. Kirat noticed him immediately. A turbaned man tends to stand out in a UK nightclub. As she looked closer, recognition dawned. She knew this man. It was Bobby. Bobby wasn't just a random acquaintance. He was someone she'd been talking to on Facebook several times a week for the past 5 months, discussing intimate details of their lives. Yet they had never met in person. Kirat approached him. "Bobby!" she called out over the noise. Bobby turned, and they exchanged greetings. But something felt off. Bobby seemed friendly, but not as warm as he should have been, considering their online connection. Kirat thought perhaps he didn't recognize her in the dark, loud club, so she clarified, "It's me, Kirat." Bobby still didn't seem to place her. Kirat assumed he might be slightly intoxicated. He did seem somewhat spaced out. Not wanting to embarrass him further, especially since he'd always been respectful online, she simply said goodnight and walked away. This seemingly harmless, slightly awkward interaction would determine the course of the next decade of Kirat's life. If only she had persisted. If only Bobby had asked more questions. If only they had met somewhere quieter, somewhere with better lighting. Perhaps Kirat could have discovered the truth much sooner and saved herself 10 years of heartbreak and a completely shattered sense of reality. But that's not how things unfolded. To understand this story, we need to rewind 6 months to 2010. Kirat Assi was a 30-year-old British Indian woman working as a radio host for a local British Punjabi station called Desi Radio. Kirat loved her job. Described as a natural-born communicator, she captivated her audience and made countless London car commutes more enjoyable. In the Sweet Bobby podcast, Kirat reflects on this period of her life. Things weren't perfect, they never are, but she was excited about her future. She had a stable career and looked forward to meeting someone special, getting married, and starting a family. Her life was full of possibilities. Fast forward to 2018, when Kirat is 41 years old. Her life looks drastically different. Those years have been stolen. The excitement and hope have vanished. There are no prospects anymore. What happened between 2010 and 2018 that could lead to such a dramatically different life? It all started with a single message. In November 2010, Kirat received a Facebook message. "Hey Kirat, I hope you're well. It's JJ's brother. Hope you got the message from Simran regarding a note he had written. He'd always put in a good word for you. You got his better side. Looked up to you as a big sister, as he told us. Regards, Bobby." Bobby. This message might seem random, but Kirat actually knew who Bobby was, sort of. JJ, the person Bobby mentioned, was Kirat's cousin's boyfriend. Kirat had a cousin named Simran who was 17 in 2010, about 10 years younger than Kirat, and was dating JJ. Like many young couples, JJ and Simran's relationship was on and off. During their breakups, JJ would reach out to Kirat for advice on how to win Simran back. That's how Kirat and JJ began texting, with Kirat helping JJ like an older sister would. Then, in August 2010, a month later, Bobby, Jay's brother, messaged Kirat thanking her for being there for JJ when he needed support. But Kirat knew Bobby through other connections as well. Both were part of the close-knit Sikh community in London, so Kirat knew of him through relatives and family members. Additionally, both came from Indian families that had migrated from India to Kenya before moving to Europe. They shared that background. Unlike meeting a random stranger on a dating app today, Kirat and Bobby actually ran in the same social circles. They existed in each other's worlds and even knew of each other before connecting on Facebook. They had numerous mutual friends on social media. Most importantly, Kirat's cousin Simran, Jay's girlfriend, had confirmed that Bobby was indeed her deceased boyfriend's brother. He was a cardiologist. He was happily married. He was handsome. There was an inherent foundation of trust from the very beginning. That's how Kirat and Bobby began talking. Slowly, Bobby started confiding in Kirat. He had just lost his younger brother, and Kirat became his virtual shoulder to cry on. There was nothing romantic here. Bobby was married, and Kirat was in an on-again, off-again relationship herself. They were simply two people bonding over shared grief. As time passed and the grief subsided, they became friends over more than just sorrow. When Bobby was expecting a baby with his wife, for instance, Kirat was the one he talked to about his happiness and the names he was considering. Some of these conversations struck Kirat as slightly odd. Why wasn't he discussing these things with his wife? But she always convinced herself that he was just a man who needed a friend. Even at this point, months after they first connected, they weren't talking every day, just randomly, a couple times a week. As Kirat herself notes in the Sweet Bobby podcast, this was before Facebook Messenger as we know it today. It wasn't the constant back and forth texting we're used to now. It was more like writing letters, a long message from Kirat, followed by a long response from Bobby hours or even days later. Gradually, Bobby's life began to change. He separated from his wife. He hated his work. He was down in the dumps. Kirat had problems too, issues with her own boyfriend. So the two grew closer. It was around this time, 5 months into their online friendship in 2011, that Kirat and Bobby came face to face for the first time, that night at Lola's, the Hawaiian-themed club where Bobby didn't recognize her. After the club incident, Bobby became distant. Eventually, he moved out of the UK to Australia, having divorced his wife and remarried an Australian woman. He even invited Kirat to his wedding. While she didn't attend, she saw photos of the wedding online. Kirat's life moved forward as well. She switched jobs, even worked on the London Olympics, made new friends, found a new partner, and Bobby largely faded from her daily thoughts. For 2 years, their connection became virtually non-existent. But in November 2013, Bobby came crashing back into Kirat's life. It happened one random day at work when Kirat saw a Facebook post from one of Bobby's friends. The post was devastating. Bobby had been shot in Kenya. The post included photos of a seriously injured Bobby lying in a hospital bed, in a coma. There was no reason to doubt the authenticity of this post. It was made by Bobby's friend. Bobby was tagged in it. Friends and family were seeing it, liking it, and commenting on it. Kirat's cousin Simran was in Kenya at the time and confirmed the news was true. The photo was right there as proof. This incident led to Kirat beginning conversations with Bobby's friend who made the post and with Bobby's new wife. In fact, they were all part of a group, 39 people exactly, who were close to Bobby and coordinating to support him through his recovery. Kirat knew multiple people in this group, just as she knew Bobby, through family, the close Sikh community, or through mutual friends. They all found comfort in each other as Bobby went in and out of a coma over several weeks, attempted suicide, suffered countless strokes and seizures, and was semi-paralyzed. Finally, he woke up enough to talk to Kirat. Bobby had lost part of his memory, so he didn't fully remember their texting relationship. But he did remember Kirat being a friend to his younger brother, JJ. The two spoke briefly before Bobby slipped into a coma once again. Then Kirat received devastating news. Bobby had passed away in 2014, succumbing to his injuries. That group of 39 people grieved together, posting wishes and messages of support and strength to one another. But how can Bobby die when he's the centerpiece of this story? How can the love story begin when its protagonist is already gone? The answer: he couldn't die, and he didn't. Months after Bobby's supposed death, Kirat received a message from Bobby's widowed wife saying there was something Kirat needed to know. To learn what it was, she should talk to her cousin Simran, the same Simran who dated Bobby's now deceased younger brother. This seemed odd to Kirat. She wasn't that involved, or that close to anyone in this story. She was merely lending support to the wife of a man she once knew as a sort of friend. She didn't need to know anything more. But then, Kirat got a call from Simran, who gave her perhaps the most unbelievable piece of information yet. Bobby was alive and in witness protection in the United States. He had been admitted to a hospital because he was partially paralyzed from the shooting. The hospital's name and his doctor's name couldn't be shared with Kirat for security reasons. Throughout 2014 and 2015, Bobby's life seemed to be in complete shambles. Kirat was all he had. His wife had grown distant, barely visiting him in the hospital. Bobby had started drinking heavily, becoming suicidal and self-destructive. Then suddenly one day, Bobby confessed to Kirat that he had feelings for her. He said he'd had these feelings for a while. Somewhere deep down, Kirat realized she might have feelings for Bobby too. By Valentine's Day 2015, the two were officially together. Kirat admits that initially she didn't necessarily have deep romantic feelings for Bobby. She loved him as a friend, certainly. And he was a friend on the verge of dying. Doctors had said he didn't have long to live. The two were countries apart, so there was no physical connection either. Kirat spoke with Bobby's nurses and specialists on his medical team regularly. These were ongoing conversations. Medical reports were sent to Kirat. There was extensive documentation corroborating Bobby's condition and prognosis. So Kirat entered this romantic relationship, but there wasn't much to it initially. They were separated by continents with no physical connection possible, and she didn't necessarily have romantic feelings for him. Part of Kirat felt like she was simply trying to make a very sick, dying friend happy. But to everyone's surprise, Bobby survived. His health improved. As that happened, Kirat developed real and deep feelings for him. Feelings is actually an understatement. Kirat fell madly in love. And it seemed Bobby did too. The vast catalog of texts, voice messages, and calls that Kirat still has saved show the development of their romance. If you set aside the strange details of Bobby's life, it was a romance like any other, innocent, childlike, and beautiful. As Alexei Mostras points out in Sweet Bobby, the two would have hours-long Skype calls, some lasting 13 hours. They would fall asleep to the sound of each other breathing, cook meals together, or watch TV shows simultaneously. These are the small intimacies that characterize any long-distance relationship. But there was one crucial difference, a detail that for many would be an absolute relationship deal-breaker. Bobby's camera was never on. His face was never visible. Bobby's voice on those calls was also unusual. It was always in whispers because of damaged vocal cords from the shooting accident. There were other strange details too. He would promise to transfer to a London hospital from his Manhattan facility and set a date. Kirat would get excited, pick out an outfit, and anticipate finally seeing him in person. Then something would inevitably go wrong, and Bobby would have to cancel. This pattern repeated over and over. Now, there are legitimate questions arising. Why didn't Kirat push harder? Why wasn't she more suspicious? What we're dealing with here is a story so convoluted and so masterfully controlling that it's no longer surprising Kirat didn't ask more questions or wasn't more suspicious. For example, one time when Bobby was supposed to arrive in London, he picked a fight with Kirat at the last minute and ended up having a heart attack during their call, which Kirat heard happening. Obviously, he couldn't come anymore. Kirat decided she would go see him if he couldn't come to her. But as she arrived at the airport, she received a call from Bobby's cousin, who essentially told her that she was at fault for causing the heart attack. She shouldn't visit him right now. Give him space. In a completely different instance in 2016, Bobby asked Kirat for help picking out baby clothes for his son. Kirat went shopping, found clothes she liked, and sent Bobby pictures of them. Days later, Bobby shared photos of his child wearing some of the exact clothes Kirat had suggested he buy. These incidents built trust. Why should she be concerned about never seeing his face on Skype when everything else provided every reason to believe Bobby was who he said he was? He had a son wearing clothes she had suggested just a week earlier. He had an ex-wife she chatted with regularly. He had cousins that her parents knew personally. She was in a group chat with Bobby's extended family that included people she knew from before she ever connected with Bobby, people who talked, texted, and sent photos. There was even internal family drama in this group. One member had left because they didn't like Kirat and were loyal to Bobby's ex-wife instead. Conversely, Bobby talked to Kirat's family too, giving them details that they would then relay to Kirat, making Bobby even more real. How could all of this be false? It was simply too elaborate for the possibility of deception to even enter Kirat's mind. There are countless incidents that reveal Bobby's manipulation tactics. Slowly, over time, Bobby became increasingly obsessive, exercising more and more control over Kirat's life. He would bombard her with love, gifts, messages, promises, texts, dates, and affection, only to suddenly withdraw it all. This made Kirat desperate to regain that level of intimacy, putting her into a cycle that slowly chipped away at her sense of self and gave Bobby increasing control. He needed to know exactly where she was at every moment, exactly who she was with, and exactly what she was doing. If she tried to pursue further education or look for a new job, he would get offended or suffer a stroke or threaten to cheat on her with his nurse. If she got her eyebrows done at a salon without telling him first, there were consequences. If she posted something on Facebook he didn't like, he reacted negatively. If someone called into her radio show and said something he disapproved of, he made his displeasure known. If she went for a mammogram during a breast cancer scare and the doctor happened to be male, that was a problem. Kirat even told her friends, "Don't touch me, don't hug me, I belong to Bobby." She was terrified of his reactions. She lost her job. She quit her radio show. She lost significant weight. She isolated herself from all her friends and family. Throughout all of this, Bobby was constantly ill, still in the hospital, with so many ailments that Kirat says she couldn't even begin to list them all. This constant sickness served as a manipulation tactic. By making himself the perpetual victim, Kirat could never be one. Bobby's stroke would always be more serious than whatever small thing Kirat felt bad about. Obviously, she couldn't consider leaving him when she was busy trying to keep him alive. All that waiting, anticipation, and agitation on Kirat's part finally seemed to end in February 2018, when Bobby actually arrived in London. At this point, it had been 3 years since they started dating. It would be only the second time since that night in the Brighton club that Kirat would see Bobby face to face. Kirat was tracking his flights. He did land, but landing didn't mean Kirat got to see him. First, he stayed at a hotel in London, but claimed he wasn't ready to see her. After many days, he said his grandmother was seriously ill, and he needed to be with her instead. Then he began claiming his own health was deteriorating. A cancer he'd had long ago had returned, which was why he couldn't meet Kirat. Kirat did show up at the hotel where he was supposedly staying, but the hotel staff told her he wasn't there. An angry and heartbroken Kirat called her cousin Simran, Jay's girlfriend, Simran, to confide in her about how Bobby just wouldn't see her. Simran lent Kirat a shoulder to cry on. Simran had been that person for Kirat throughout the entire relationship. Kirat trusted her completely. Shortly after her call with Simran, Kirat received a call from Bobby. Bobby said the hotel staff had informed him that she'd been there looking for him, and that he was the one who told staff not to let any visitors know he was there because he wasn't ready to see anyone. Kirat recounts this moment and says she never once assumed Bobby wasn't actually at the hotel. She was just sad that he didn't want to see her. This pattern continued for months after Bobby landed in London. Bobby's family told Kirat to give him space because of his illness. Kirat's family expected to meet the man their daughter was dating. All of this was causing Kirat to lose her mind. She was lying to her parents, telling them she was seeing Bobby when instead she sat alone in her car for hours. Part of Kirat hoped that if she went on a long walk someday, she would simply wander off and something would happen, and she would never have to return to her reality. Kirat was reaching her breaking point. She just wanted answers. Strange details were now standing out to her, like a phone call with Bobby where the background noise from his end just didn't sound like London. So Kirat did what she probably should have done long ago. She hired a private investigator. All she wanted was Bobby's address, just to confirm whether he was telling the truth about his location. The investigator got her the address, but it wasn't in London. It was in Brighton, where the club had been 8 years ago, where she first encountered Bobby. Bobby was lying, but about what exactly she didn't know. By June 10th, 2018, Kirat had had enough. She was profoundly unhappy. Her life had never been so devoid of love and hope. That June afternoon, she had an argument with Bobby over something trivial and decided to go for a drive to clear her head. This drive was meant to be random, but somewhere along the way, Kirat decided to use the address from the private investigator and simply show up at Bobby's house. All she wanted was to see him, to show him that seeing each other in person wasn't something to fear, that they could handle it. Kirat began her 2-hour journey to see her partner of 3 years for only the second time ever. As Kirat pulled into Bobby's driveway, it all looked somewhat familiar from photos Bobby had shared. Little did she know, inside the home, Bobby and his wife, happily married for many years, were putting their son to sleep. Kirat gathered every ounce of courage she had and rang the doorbell. Bobby opened the door and saw a woman he didn't recognize at all. Just like that night at the Hawaiian-themed bar 8 years earlier, he had no idea who she was. In her eyes, though, he saw anger and sadness. "How could you do this? 8 years!" Kirat screamed at him. Bobby was frightened by this random woman in his driveway claiming to know him. Part of him wondered if she might be looking for his brother Jay. They were often confused for each other. "Maybe you're looking for Jay," he told her. "We're often mistaken for each other." But Kirat knew exactly who she was looking for, the man she had been falling asleep to for the past 3 years. It was Bobby, not his brother Jay. Jay was dead, or so Kirat believed. But from the way Bobby was talking, it didn't sound like Bobby thought Jay was dead at all. In the middle of this heated exchange, Bobby's wife came downstairs, the woman Kirat thought was his ex-wife. The moment Kirat saw her, she thought she had her answer. Bobby was cheating on her with his ex-wife. That's why he was acting so strangely. Bobby told his wife he had no idea who this woman was, and his wife believed him. To convince them, Kirat pulled out her phone to show them Bobby's number that she had saved. The contact image and name were both Bobby's, but the phone number was not his. She even had him call her number so she could see if he had her saved in his phone. When he dialed, he didn't have her number. Despite this evidence, Kirat still couldn't believe it. He must be lying in front of his wife, she thought. "How do I know you don't have 2 phone numbers?" she remembers saying. Then something happened that gave Kirat a sinking feeling in her stomach. As she stood at Bobby's entrance talking to him and his wife, Kirat's phone rang. It was Bobby, but not the Bobby standing in front of her. Kirat picked up, spoke briefly to the person on the phone, and hung up. She was questioning everything. Part of her wondered if Bobby's wife, who had gone back inside, had used a different phone to call her, pretending to be Bobby. She knew she needed to clear this up, and the only person she could think of who could help was Simran, her cousin Simran. Simran, who had visited Bobby in the hospital in Kenya when he was shot. Simran, who had dated Bobby's deceased younger brother. Simran, who had been her one and only confidant through this entire tumultuous relationship. "Let me call Simran," Kirat said. That name rang a bell in Bobby's mind. His brother used to date a girl named Simran years ago. "Is this Simran Bhogal by any chance?" Bobby asked. It was. Exactly that, Simran. When Kirat called Simran in front of Bobby, Bobby spoke to her too. Simran calmed Bobby down by telling him that Kirat was her cousin and was just confused, and that Simran would help clear everything up. She then calmed Kirat down by telling her that Bobby was behaving this way because of his ex-wife. With the situation slightly calmer, Kirat decided to head home, though she was crying so hard she could barely see. On her way home, Kirat picked up Simran, and they both went to the nearest police station. Meanwhile, Bobby and his wife had also called the police. After filing 2 separate reports, Bobby and his wife went to sleep, hoping never to deal with this bizarre situation again. Kirat and Simran went to their respective homes. Kirat knew her life would never be the same, but part of her thought the worst was behind her. Her partner had been caught cheating. That was the worst of it. Little did she know, the real nightmare was about to begin. The next morning, when Simran pulled into Kirat's home, Kirat noticed that Simran didn't exit the car right away. Her brother was in the car with her, and it looked like they were arguing. Kirat felt uneasy about this and ran downstairs to open the door for Simran, a girl she had viewed as her baby sister, someone she had tried to protect. Part of Kirat wanted to apologize to Simran for pulling her into her drama, for using up her time and energy. But as Simran walked to Kirat's door that morning, it was Simran who apologized. "I need to tell you something," Simran said. Kirat asked if she wanted to come inside. "I don't think I should," she responded. "I need to tell you something." A sentence that left Simran's mouth multiple times that morning, each repetition giving Kirat a deeper pit in her stomach. Something was very wrong. Then 4 words left Simran's mouth that brought Kirat's world crashing down. "It was all me. I was Bobby. Bobby is me." No. Kirat didn't understand at first. She wondered if Simran had been threatened by Bobby to say this. But Simran was adamant. She was Bobby. "What about JJ?" Kirat asked. Simran's own boyfriend who had died, which was the reason Bobby had messaged Kirat to begin with. That was Simran too. JJ existed and was real, but was also very much alive. "What about Bobby's cousin who called when I was at the airport about to go see him in New York?" Simran. "What about Bobby's 2 wives?" Simran. "What about Bobby's friend who posted about his death on Facebook?" Also, Simran. "The medical team that took care of Bobby?" Simran. "Why? What about the 39 people in the group chat?" All Simran. "The 20+ family members in the other group chat?" They were all Simran. The next thing Kirat remembers is collapsing against the wall. She asked Simran every question you're probably thinking right now. "Why did you do this to me? What did I ever do to you? You had so many chances to stop. Why didn't you?" But Simran had no real apologies to make, no genuine explanations. Even that morning, after confessing to the damage she had caused, Simran seemed cold, calculating, and distant. In the midst of this conversation, it suddenly dawned on Kirat that she had been falling asleep to the sound of Simran breathing every night for years. It was this realization that really devastated her. It was this that made her physically ill. Let me explain what happened as simply as possible. There is a Bobby, the real Bobby, the one Kirat met at the club 8 years ago, the one whose house she showed up at in 2018. That Bobby is happily married with a son. He is not a cardiologist. He's never been in witness protection. He's never been hospitalized for more than a few hours. And most importantly, he has never had a relationship with Kirat. The Bobby that Kirat spoke with is not this person, but is based on him. The life of Kirat's Bobby occasionally intersects with real Bobby's life. For example, Kirat knows the names of real Bobby's parents, siblings, friends, son, and wife. But Kirat's Bobby is fake. Not only is Kirat's Bobby fabricated, so is everyone from Bobby's life that Kirat ever talked to. Almost 60 characters were created by Simran. All of them have different personalities, different writing styles, different life stories. But some of these 60 characters are based on people who actually exist in reality. Think about what that means. Simran created 60 fictional people and maintained conversations between them and Kirat. It's like playing doubles tennis, but you're the only player, or playing cricket where you're both the bowler and the batsman simultaneously. Remember the political drama within the family that was mentioned? That was a figment of Simran's imagination. Drama she created between characters that didn't exist. And this wasn't just taking over Kirat's life, it was equally consuming Simran's life. Simran's own friends have come forward to say there were times when Simran wouldn't participate in their girls' nights out because she had a call in UK time. Many now assume that what she called a work meeting was actually her date night call with Kirat. Simran was losing out on real, actual experiences because she was so deeply engaged in this fantasy. This complex intermingling of fact and fiction made the fake Bobby easy to trust. Part of the story involves numerous fake characters who are based on very real people that Kirat's parents knew, or that Kirat's school friends knew, or whom Kirat had run into at events and celebrations. As Alexei Mostras explains it best, the important thing is that this cast of characters worked together. They existed to affirm each other's stories, even when those stories seemed unbelievable. In domestic abuse cases, this behavior is called toxic triangulation, making something real by having multiple people confirm it. So every time Kirat doubted something, someone she trusted confirmed it was true. This was the intricate web of lies and deceit that Kirat's younger cousin had spun. But the reason didn't fully make sense. Simran was, as far as we know, a straight young woman who gained no sexual pleasure from doing this, unlike many other catfish scenarios. Kirat didn't transfer vast sums of money to Bobby, and Bobby never asked for any, so Simran didn't appear to have a monetary motive. Kirat and Simran had a loving and caring relationship, so Simran didn't do this out of revenge or spite. So why? The complete answer to this question rests only with Simran, but developments in the Sweet Bobby investigation provide some insight. When Kirat tried to file a criminal case against Simran, she failed. Catfishing isn't a criminal offense in the UK, and the only real victim in this entire saga, according to the police, was real Bobby. The police were wrong. Coercive and controlling behavior has been illegal in the UK since 2015. But the police didn't seem to care about that. The police also didn't acknowledge that Simran had possibly violated many other laws, such as the Malicious Communications Act. The police even went so far as to insinuate that it was Kirat who had some sort of mental problem and needed to seek help. What Kirat was able to file, however, was a civil case. In 2020, she won it with a substantial settlement item. As part of this settlement, Kirat also received an apology from Simran. Simran's only condition for the apology was that it had to be completely private. Nobody else was allowed to read it or make copies of it. Kirat was unwilling to accept that, so their lawyers reached an agreement where Simran would redraft an apology that she was comfortable with 30 predetermined people seeing. Kirat got to pick the 30 people, but none of those 30 people could tell others or make copies of the apology. This new apology was so vague that Kirat herself suggested edits to it, which Simran accepted. So this apology isn't even fully in Simran's own words. But in the process of editing and redrafting apologies, Kirat totally forgot about that first apology, the one meant to be fully private, the one written entirely by Simran. That apology is the closest thing anyone has to understanding why Simran did what she did. In that apology, the specifics of which Kirat couldn't share, Simran implied that she had had a difficult life too, and in her mind, both she and Kirat were gaining some form of joy by escaping to this fantasy world. Later, Simran claimed she did try to end the lies and deception, and that's why she was being so cruel to Kirat, but Kirat was the one who always stuck around. This explanation is worthless. Somehow it has come back to being Kirat's fault. Simran suggests Kirat seemed to be enjoying it, and should have walked away when Bobby became abusive. This seems less like an explanation, and more like a diversion. What's most tragic is that while Kirat dealt with all of this, the court case, the shame brought to her family, the loss of her job, friends, and connections, Simran continued to hold her position as a vice president at a prominent British bank and continued posting online about vacations she was taking. While Simran no longer holds that same job today, this doesn't feel like adequate accountability. But this apology letter isn't the only insight into Simran's behavior. Remember JG, Simran's boyfriend who had supposedly died? His death was the reason Bobby ever contacted Kirat in the first place. But as I mentioned, JJ was very much alive. JJ and Simran did date back in 2010 and 2011. The messages between them reveal that Kirat wasn't the first time Simran had created fake identities to control a relationship. She had done it while dating JJ too. For example, while JJ was in India during their relationship in 2010, JJ received messages from someone claiming to be Simran's cousin. This cousin said Simran had been involved in a hit-and-run accident and was badly injured. The injuries described in these messages were eerily familiar. They mirrored the same language, the same symptoms, the same medical drama that would later appear in Bobby's story. When a distraught JJ tried to find out which hospital Simran had been admitted to, using real connections, real friends, and real family members, he couldn't find any record of her being there. Even then, something felt off. And yet, once Simran had supposedly recovered, the pattern continued. She would repeatedly fall ill. She would suffer sudden medical emergencies. And each time, JJ would hear about it through strangers, friends, cousins, acquaintances, who may never have existed at all. This wasn't new behavior. It was a rehearsal. The same characters, the same emergencies, the same emotional manipulation, the same reliance on fear, guilt, and obligation. Simran had created an entire universe of identities long before Kirat ever entered it. And when Kirat finally did, Simran already knew exactly how to control someone from behind a screen. After the truth came out, Kirat's world didn't simply return to normal. There was no reset. There was no moment where everything suddenly made sense and healed itself. Instead, Kirat had to grieve something that technically never existed, a relationship that wasn't real, a man who wasn't real, and a decade of her life that had quietly disappeared. She lost her career. She lost friendships. She lost trust in her own instincts. And perhaps, most devastating of all, she lost time. Time she could never get back. When Kirat turned to the authorities, she discovered something deeply unsettling. Catfishing in itself was not a criminal offense in the UK. Despite the psychological devastation, despite the years of coercion, despite the clear pattern of control, the police viewed the primary victim as the real Bobby because his identity had been used. Kirat, the woman whose life had been dismantled, was treated as secondary. Even though coercive and controlling behavior had been illegal in the UK since 2015, it was largely ignored in her case. At one point, Kirat was even encouraged to seek mental health help, as though the trauma she endured somehow reflected a flaw in her judgment, rather than a crime committed against her. The system failed to recognize what this really was. This was not a romance scam. This was long-term, psychological abuse. Kirat eventually pursued a civil case. In 2020, she won. The settlement was described as substantial, though the exact terms remain private. As part of that settlement, Simran issued an apology, but even that apology came with conditions. Simran initially insisted the apology be completely private, never shared, never copied, never discussed. Kirat refused. Eventually, a compromise was reached. A revised apology that only 30 people could see, chosen by Kirat. And even then, no one was allowed to share it further. That apology was so vague that Kirat herself suggested edits. Simran accepted them, which means the closest thing to accountability in this case wasn't even written entirely by the person responsible. The original, fully private apology, written solely by Simran, remains unseen. And according to Kirat, that letter suggested something chilling. That Simran believed both of them had benefited from this fantasy. That it had brought them joy. Today, Simran lives her life largely out of the public eye. And Kirat is left rebuilding hers. This story is often described as the most extreme catfishing case ever. But that description doesn't quite capture the truth. This wasn't about romance. This wasn't about money. This wasn't even about deception alone. This was about control. It was about rewriting someone's reality so completely that they no longer trusted their own perception of the world. It was about using familiarity, family, community, shared history as a weapon. And it was about how easily abuse can hide behind screens, messages, and voices we think we know. We often imagine danger as something distant, a stranger, a shadow, someone we don't recognize. But sometimes, the most devastating harm comes from the people closest to us, from the voices we trust, from the faces we never question. Kirat Assi survived something almost unimaginable. And while her story is painful to hear, it is also a warning. Because in a world where connection is easier than ever, manipulation can be too. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. Kirat's story is a powerful reminder that manipulation can happen to anyone, no matter how smart, how careful, or how connected you are. If this story affected you, or if you know someone who might be going through something similar, please reach out. Talk to someone. Trust your instincts. And if you found this video valuable, please consider liking it, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into cases that matter. Take care of yourselves, stay safe online, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks again for watching.